Now, shifting gears a little bit, obviously, the incinerator in South Seneca has also been a big talking point over the last 6 months or so, at least. Talk to us a little bit about where that stands in the process right now from your perspective, and where you feel that's going now, heading into the rest of 2018 and then into 19.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that we get that bill passed before the end of 2018. And the reason being is, as you probably are already aware, that we passed that bill unanimously in the state Senate. And we passed it at the end of the session when people were saying that things weren't getting done in the state Senate, which I totally disagree with. But staying on the subject of the incinerator, I want to give so much thanks out to the wine industry, Willow Lean, to Seneca, Gas-Free Seneca, Joseph Campbell, Yvonne Taylor, and others, because they really rallied the troops and really put the support behind me. You know, when I was putting together the bill which would ban this incinerator, this specific incinerator, not incinerators across New York State, not at all, but we had to compromise. You know, in order to get the Assembly to agree to carry a same-as bill, both sides had to compromise. I worked with the chair of the Assembly Energy Committee, Mike Cusack, and he did an incredible job as well. We worked with the independent power producers, we brought the environmental advocates to the table, we brought, like I said, the wine industry, and so many others. Republicans, Democrats, because it's a bipartisan issue, we brought everyone to the table. We were able to compromise on a bill that was supposed to pass both houses. I was able to get the environmental advocate group to rank it with 2 pine trees, which means it's a good bill, in hopes that that would help the Assembly Democrats get the bill passed. Like I said, I'm very proud of the fact I was able to get it passed unanimously in the Senate, and it was supposed to pass in the Assembly. It had so much support.
Is that just, I feel like a lot of people are going to feel like that's just politics as usual in the Assembly. Is that your feeling as well, or is it because it did seem like this had all the momentum, all the right boxes checked off, and yet here we are talking about it. And
we got the governor to come out and publicly say that this wasn't the right location for the incinerator, you know, just off the shore of Seneca and Cayuga Lakes and less than a mile from the Romulus school districts. We had everything lined up. We should have been able to pass that through both houses. And I have to say that I'm still shaking my head trying to figure out why it didn't come to the floor. It never went to the floor on the Assembly side. And I reached out to a number of high-ranking people in the Assembly, and what I've been told, and it's disgusting, is that that bill was somehow tied to speed cameras in New York City. And to me, that's just politics at its absolute worst. Speaker Hasty has said that, you know, we shouldn't manipulate local bills, and yet that's exactly what he did. He never let this bill come to the floor for a vote. And I have to say that in the back of my mind, I wonder, where was the governor on this issue? You know, he disappeared from Albany during those last few weeks of session. But if he truly felt that this was, you know, if he truly believed in what he said, that this is a bad location, why didn't he say to the speaker, get this bill on the floor and get it passed?
yeah, so I guess for some of the folks who might not pay attention to politics quite as close, they might be scratching their heads saying, how could a bill about an incinerator be tied to speed cameras in New York City? Walk us through what that dynamic is and how that sort of happens in politics in general in New York State.
Well, you know, this is my first time experiencing it so personally and so closely. I think it was a shock to everyone. I don't think this was a typical negotiation or compromise. I think this surprised a lot of people. And again, I don't know why it happened. When we work on the state budget, there's compromise. You know, everybody wants certain things and they don't want other things. And there has to be compromise. And I always fight for the best for upstate New York and for the 54th Senate District. On this, I actually spent more time in the Assembly on the floor at the end of session than I did in the Senate. I don't know what happened. I honestly think that we caught people by surprise, that this freshman senator was able to generate so much support. We had over 300 businesses write letters opposed to the incinerator. We got so much media attention, you know, not just here locally, but across the state of New York. I think it caught everybody by surprise. Someone panicked and said, we can't let that out.
That's really, really interesting. Now, shifting gears, staying on the environmental side, August, September, every year, HAB season, it seems to pick up. Do you feel New York State is doing enough, and what are some of the opportunities that you see over the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, so the harmful algal blooms, the cyanobacterias, I think it's, it's a crushing issue for the Finger Lakes. It's very scary to me. We have put $65 million towards our lakes, funding for a number of measures to help address the harmful algal bloom situation. The problem is that we can't pinpoint one cause. What is it that's causing the harmful algal blooms? It seems to vary depending upon the lake you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I worked really hard for is to get money in the budget that will allow us to do real things here in our area. For instance, the septic system rebate program, there's money in the budget so that people who live within a certain area surrounding Seneca Lake, Canandaigua, Wasco, and other lakes, they're able to apply for a rebate up to $10,000 to replace a failing septic system. We know that failing septic systems discharging into lakes causes issues, causes the HABs, so that's a good measure. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more to reach out. Those programs are administered by their local soil and water conservation district. Mm-hmm. So I encourage people to reach out. As you know, or maybe you don't know, the governor established 12 priority lakes. And I have 4 Finger Lakes in my Senate district. Owasco and Cayuga were part of the priority lakes. I fought hard to get Canandaigua and Seneca added in. I was not able to. The governor would not move on that issue. But what I was able to do was to get seats at the tables for their meetings for Kevin Alvaney from the Canandaigua Lake Watershed and Dr. Lisa Kleckner from Finger Lakes Institute. So they have input at all of those meetings. And the other thing we were able to do, there was some question on the funding, the grant funding that would be available for lakes with HABs, if those 12 priority lakes would get special treatment, if you will, score extra points, and have a better chance of getting that grant funding than our lakes that aren't on the list. We made sure that that's not happening. Also with Seneca Lake, I think it's important to have a watershed manager or a lake manager, if you will, one person who coordinates the efforts of all of the communities around the lake. And I was able to secure not grant funding, but an actual line in the New York State budget for $200,000, which will allow for the hiring of a Seneca Lake watershed manager. So that will help us to, again, pinpoint the issues addressing harmful algal blooms, come up with plans that can be adopted by all the communities, because it doesn't help, if just one community puts in place measures to protect the lake and the others don't follow suit. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other issue that's so important to us here in the 54th is working with our farmers, right, to manage the runoff from their farms. There's significant funding for CAFOs, the large dairy farms, to do manure storage. There's a lot that's available, and again, if anyone has questions, I encourage them to give my office a call.
So let's talk a little more about the farming aspect. You have probably in less than 2 years become the state's one of the state's biggest advocates for the farm industry as a whole, which is great because agriculture is pivotal here in the Finger Lakes. Obviously, the reason why is probably pretty personal, but I just am very curious about your feelings toward the actual progress you've made or been able to make in securing grant funding and different changes in legislation, that sort of thing, over the last year and a half.
Yeah, so I think, again, I'm the chair of the Senate chair of the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources, and that includes agriculture. It includes everything that impacts our small rural communities. But on the agricultural issue, I've taken a vested interest because, as you said, Josh, agriculture and tourism, those are the 1 and 2 industries in our area, and they're so important to us. So fighting for the proper funding and the state budget has been critical. Fighting for legislation that our farmers need has been a priority for me. And just to give some background there, when the governor comes out with his budget and presents it, the 2 years now that I've been through budget cycles, he zeroes out all of the farm, all of the agricultural funding, whether it's research for hops and barley or honeybees or it's for storage or it's for new programs to help farmers. He zeroes it out. And every year, the 2 years that I've been there, I've gone to bat, staying up 24 hours a day watching what's happening at the different budget tables to make sure that there are restorations made.